The Demon Realm is a world where societies can thrive on the rotting corpses of enormous titans. Which kind can carve living familiars from trees? And if you don't watch your step, you can find yourself in a completely different era. Just like me, if I walked into the wrong small town in America. The source of this madness has been shrouded in mystery for as long as we've been watching the Owl House. And while some of it may just boil down to, it's magic, I ain't gotta explain there's been plenty of hints that tangible answers do exist. The key to all of these answers is none other than the Collector. A child of the stars with unimaginable power, capable of reconstructing reality itself. I took some time to sit down and really think over the Collector and their role in the story of the Owl House itself. And honestly, what a perfect antagonist to ring in the endgame. The Collector is not only connected to the mystery of the Demon Realm, but he's connected to each of the main characters. And resolving this newfound conflict with the deity, it's not far-fetched to think that Luz, Ida, and especially King will also resolve their individual character arcs. It just all depends on one question. Can they win the Collector's game? Also, if you can please like and subscribe, check out our merch at Toondrip. We got an awesome Owl House inspired design with more on the way. Giving it a look is greatly appreciated. Alright, now let's get this ball rolling. At first glance, the Collector's introduction into the Owl House may feel fast, but if we revisit select episodes throughout Season 2, the seed is planted as early as the third episode, Echoes of the Past, with the introduction of the temple Ida found King in, featuring murals of a war between Titans and Titan trappers, which we later found out was a cult that not only worshipped the Collector, but the deity himself was referred to as the Grand Huntsman. Meaning, when it came to slaying Titans, he was the best. And I mean, now that we've seen his power, come on, how could he not have been? Not to mention the symbol King carved into his collar came back into play with King's Tide, as the young Titan was invisible to the Collector's eye before removing the medallion. Plus, are we gonna act like the Collector didn't have better setup than Belos, who was just name dropped a few times over Season 1 before popping up in the last 2 episodes? Meanwhile, the Collector basically appeared in 6 episodes before being freed. Even beyond the little details, the Collector has had the most setup of all the antagonists by far. I don't know, the idea of his introduction being rushed is just a criticism I've seen shared around, and while everyone's entitled to their opinion, you're still wrong. Sorry about it. Even if he's had limited screen time physically, I think what pushes the Collector far as an antagonist already, at least for me, is how he connects to each of the main 3 characters. For Ida, the Collector is the origin point of her curse, as we saw the Collector in what we can assume to be his more menacing Grand Huntsman persona corner the Owl Beast on Titan Trapper Island and transform the beast into the scroll that Lilith would one day retrieve from the night market. Ida's curse has been the crux of her struggles throughout the narrative, and now she has to face the all-powerful god responsible for altering the course of her life without Luz by her side. As for King, he possesses the deepest connection and parallels to the Collector, thanks to Bill and the Titan Trappers. The two are now directly linked to one another, and again, the Collector murked his whole race. Yet, it can't be overlooked that they're both children and display childlike behavior, which communicates to me that quite a bit of information around the Collector can be worked out from observing King's own arc. For example, we know King is more of a prince, who was never able to properly meet his dad on account of him being, murdered and gentrified. So for the Collector, who was specified by Kikimora to be a child of the stars, I can't help but to question what's going on with his parents, and if the identity and role of his parents may have something to do with why King's father, in the Collector's own words, never let him play with King. But more on that later, so we can shed some light on Luz and the Collector. With Luz being a human who just happened to wander into the Demon Realm and all of this mayhem, she lacks a direct connection to the Collector unlike the other 2. However, there's still plenty of parallels between them, as their connection still exists. It's just entirely thematic. We were introduced to Luz as someone who didn't have the greatest grip on reality, often indulging in escapism, treating life like a game, and longing to live in a world of fantasy. She wanted to leave the life where she was a loner who didn't fit in behind. initially viewing the Boiling Isles as a vehicle to live out her fantasy. But thanks to the genuine connections she's made, she was able to recognize this world as something more, something real, growing as a person thanks to her friends. Whereas Luz was introduced as a loner in society, the Collector was introduced as someone literally stranded in a dimension with no one but themselves. Whereas Luz indulged in escapism and used her imagination to escape to a fantasy world, the Collector indulged in escapism by using his imagination to literally mold the world around him into whatever he wants. At least, that's the implication. There are two different sides of the same coin, which means we already know how to defeat the Collector. It isn't with some good old fisting glyphs, but by genuinely befriending the kid, something Luz has gotten a lot of practice at throughout the series. Even if it didn't always work, it's clear the Collector's never had a true friend. Loser. He's had a cult that regards him as a god, and an emperor who viewed him as a resource. As evidently, Belos struck a deal with the Collector to wield magic stronger than anything native to the Isles, in exchange for the Collector's freedom. In any situation, even when King freed him from his beast ball of a prison, the Collector was just being used. But why would the Collector be down with mowing down all the Titans, or help Belos wipe out all the witches? Well, we already know the answer thanks to King's Tide. The Collector thinks he was just playing games. A quick but very important line in Clouds on the Horizon revolved around the Collector growing tired of playing Philip's game.
We spent hundreds of years playing his game. I want to play a new game.
But what exactly does he mean by that? What is Philip's game? And how the hell is committing mass genocide winning the game? Well, we already saw what Philip's game was in Hollow Mind, in two of the early portraits of Philip's life. One that features Philip wearing an early version of the Belos mask, while his brother Caleb sports a witch's hat. The other portrait depicts the two brothers continuing to play a game as a mob appears to be burning a witch behind them. This game, presumably called something like Witches vs. Hunters, must have been what Philip pitched his plan as to the Collector once they began to make contact. Philip and Collector as the Hunters, with the rest of the Boiling Isles as the Witches. To beat the game, you gotta wipe them all out. And the quote-unquote fun doesn't stop there. Other games we've seen the Collector play include classics like Tag, which is a literal game of tag, but whoever's it can very much die, as seen with Philip. Okay, he's probably not dead, but you get the idea. There's also Hide and Seek, as again, King was able to be cloaked from the Collector thanks to his collar. Not to mention, that invisibility glyph Luz invented may come in handy for a later round. But then there's this new game, Owl House. What is it? Before King could even explain the rules, the Collector started terraforming everything around them. Now, games have always been a part of the series. Grudgeby, Flyer Derby, Wilds vs. Covens, even Witches vs. Hunters. And the common pattern in all of these is that it's always a two-team game with a defined goal in mind. I think this game of Owl House could involve owls versus snakes. As we know, there's been a ton of snake imagery all over the show, though it's usually thought to be allusions towards Luz's talisman. But not only are snakes natural predators of owls, at least baby owls, whereas adult owls become the predator, we know they can symbolize rebirth thanks to the shedding of their skin, tying into how basically every character has shed their skin one way or another throughout the series, going through significant character development accompanied with a visual transformation to boot. Plus, I don't know, maybe the Collector thinks snakes are cool, cause they are. Love me a good snake. It's also worth keeping in mind that King claimed they're gonna need a lot of players for a game of Owl House, which of course was just him talking out of his ass to ensure everyone's saved from the draining spell, but we don't know how the Collector is going to interpret that. It's also possible that Owl House could be a gauntlet of games between two teams, where players get eliminated gradually, like Total Drama Island meets Squid Game, which is why the Collector took it upon himself to build his image of an owl house, to ensure there's rooms dedicated to each game. After spending all that time imprisoned, it's feasible that the Collector wants more control over Owl House than he had in his previous adventures. So although it was King's idea, they may end up playing by the Collector's rules. But then, what happens to the losers of the game? This is where I think a previous plot thread can have a satisfying resolution. The petrified petrified rogue witches. I could easily see petrification being the price losers of the game are forced to pay, almost as an unsettling compromise between Collector and King. Again, Collector may just be fine with killing the losers outright, because he's desensitized to murder. However, King would have a bone to pick with that approach, and with the Collector's magic being at the top, I don't see why he wouldn't opt for petrifying witches with the promise of freeing them later, which is something that could actually happen. All the petrified witches could be saved, because if anyone would have that power, it'd be him. On the other hand, I think it'd be hilarious if the stoned witches end up functioning like amiibo, popping up in games as Smash-style assist trophies. I think still kind of unsettling, but depending on how that would be ported, it'd be kind of comical. Another question around the Collector's game is what the winning team would receive as a prize. I'm sure this is something King hasn't thought too far ahead on, but hear me out. What if a Collector observes everyone's palisman and feels like he's missing out? After all, palismen aren't just tools for witches to perform magic. They're friends. Real friends. What better prize at that point for the Collector? What better incentive for him to win the game of Owl House than the soon-to-be hatched palisman that belongs to Luz Noceda, left behind in the Demon Realm at the end of Season 2. Just think about that. One last question though. Why is Collector okay with killing? Who taught him the concept of games? Who raised this kid? This is where I think his parents come into play. Parents, especially fathers, have played a major role in the Owl House when it comes to character development. Luz lost her dad and has been raised solo by Camilla ever since. Ida had a falling out with her dad after losing control and taking out his eye as the Owl Beast, and barely maintained a strained relationship with her mother. King never got to meet his dad, because his dad Perry's a single father. Amity had a strained relationship with both their parents, but has made progress reconciling with her father. Hunter was deeply manipulated by his father figure. The list goes on. So I think a major key in figuring out the Collector comes with figuring out his relationship with his parents, and how that set the stage for his fake friendships with the Titan Trappers and Belos. Keep in mind, this is all just conjecture, but what if the Collector's parents were involved with the war against the Titans? Or just intergalactic wars we have no idea about? Or, aiming even higher, now that we know Belos got his magic from the Collector, what if these celestial beings are why magic is in the Demon Realm in the first place? What if they brought magic to the planet, magic somehow ended up in the possession of Titans, and the Titan Trappers were fighting to claim the magic? Magic being gifted to the Titans may be why the Death of King's father resulted in the birth of demons. But back to the Collector's parents. When the child inquired about their involvement, they could have masked the harsh reality of war to their child by explaining it as nothing more than a game. A game that he wasn't allowed to partake in. Neglected by his parents due to their political obligations. I imagine if King's a prince, Collector may have also been a prince for parallel's sake. The boy may have been left longing for a genuine connection, someone he could play games with himself. This eventually brought him to the Titan Trappers, who were blown away by his massive display of power. The warped idea of war being nothing more than a game, sending the neglected child of the stars down a dangerous path. Now, the only possible hints around the Collector's parents come in the form of Knock Knock Knocking on Hootie's Doors flashback and the Shattered Tablet in Edge of the World. While the figure who captured the Owl Beast is assumed to be the Collector and is credited as them, this isn't what the Collector was wearing in King's Tide, nor was he anywhere near this height. However, we could easily chalk this up to a transformation. But then, Edge of the World and King's Tide established that there are two different Crescent Moon tablets that can contact the Collector. One that remained in one piece, and the other split in two pieces stitched together. This has me wondering if the Collector didn't come to the Demon Realm alone, but instead with at least one other person. Perhaps a parent? At some point, this parent could have been captured and destroyed, as reflected in the stone tablet. And eventually, the Collector himself was sealed away in another. Shit, who's to say the Grand Huntsman the Titan Trappers were waiting for and the Collector we're acquainted with aren't two different people? What if they were trying to summon a father, but unleashed a child instead? At this point, I'm probably overthinking, but again, anything could happen. Hell, now that the Collector's free, the Demon Realm could attract the attention of another parent, who assumed their son was dead, but now can once again sense their presence. Which could mean the Collector ain't even the final threat. Who's to say? And no matter what happens, I'm optimistic the Owl House will pull through and give us a satisfying conclusion to not just the Collector, but the series as a whole. Stop saying they're gonna pull the Star Verses! But as always, these are are just my insane thoughts, and I want to hear yours. What do you believe the Collector's game could be? What are the rules and conditions you envision? And what do you think could be the prize? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and keep the conversation going by giving us a follow at OstricVox and Roundtable Vids on Twitter and Instagram. Be sure to check out Toon Drip, and shout out to JANKYBONES for another incredible thumbnail. Give them a follow on Twitter and Instagram at BoneJanky. Thank you guys for watching, and there's more great cartoon content on the way. See ya!